Hey folks, Astus here. In this video, I want to talk to you guys about probably my favorite CRPG of all time, and that is Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire. I'm talking about it now because Obsidian will soon be releasing Avowed, the next game set in the Pillars of Eternity universe, and I am hyped. I will likely be making content for Avowed, but it occurred to me that many of y'all, my audience, are unfamiliar with this incredible IP, and that needs to be remedied. I also just think it's criminal that the Pillars of Eternity series isn't recognized for what it is, which is one of the best games ever made in this genre. So the purpose of this video is to try to get you into playing Pillars Deadfire so you can see that for yourself. But wait, I'm a Baldur's Gate 3 channel. Isn't Baldur's Gate 3 the best game in this genre? Honestly, not for me, although it's close. It depends on what you want from an RPG. Baldur's Gate 3 is streets ahead of every other game on cinematics and in-depth companion interactivity, and those are not small things. I see it as a Marvel movie you get to play, and that's never been done before to the level of depth and competency Larian delivered with Baldur's Gate 3. It really is a landmark game in the genre, and it deserves the praise it received. That said, those things, cinematics and companion interactivity, they aren't really what I love CRPGs for. The biggest thing I want from a CRPG is an incredible tactical combat system, and Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire has, in my opinion, the best in the genre. When it comes to narrative design, I want focused, insightful exploration of themes, and themes that are worthy of exploring. I also want world building that feels vital and real. On world building, Baldur's Gate 3 is really held back by the Forgotten Realms setting, in my opinion. Whatever vitality the Forgotten Realms had has been murdered by 20 plus years of uninspired commercialization. From what I can tell, Forgotten Realms worked hard to become the default. And being the default is great for investors, I guess, but it's terrible for us, the consumers. By contrast, the setting of Pillars of Eternity, called Eora, does feel vital and real. It has that feature that great worlds must have, which is a Tolkien-esque sensitivity to language. Words and names in Eora have meaning. They communicate culture and history in a way that names like Minsk, Orin, or Rythwin just don't. Think of it this way. What are the naming conventions of Baldur's Gate culture? There are none, obviously. It's just whatever sounds vaguely fantasy and medieval to the writers, and there have been many writers who've contributed to this IP. They don't all have the same standards of what's fantasy and medieval, and you won't see that in Pillars of Eternity. If you meet an NPC named Verzano, you know immediately that they are Vailian. When you speak to them, they have a Vailian accent, and mix in Vailian words like Ak, Kasita, or Postanago. If you play a dozen or so hours, these words will have meaning to you. For example, Postanago means carrot. But in Vailian culture, calling someone a carrot means you're calling them an idiot. See what I mean? It feels real, right? Larian tried to do this where they could, like, for example, with the Githyanki, and that is one of the reasons I like Lae'zel so much. She feels like she comes from a real culture with a real language and real history. On the matter of narrative themes, Pillars of Eternity beautifully explores historical themes of the IRL Renaissance Enlightenment. In particular, colonialism and the death of God. But I've already made a whole video discussing this. It's linked in the description. No need to go over it again. So, in summary, why do I recommend you play this game? First, it has S-tier combat. Second, S-tier world building. And third, nuanced exploration of historical and philosophical themes. If you aren't interested in those things, then you're probably not interested in my channel either, because that's what I want to talk about. Anyways, I've outlined now why I think you ought to play Pillars Deadfire. Now we should actually play it. Let's dive in. Alright, here we are at the main menu of Pillars of Eternity Deadfire. We are going to start a new game, and I'm going to do an edited Let's Play through the first island of the game. For me, this island was a major obstacle for me getting hooked. It teaches you a lot of lessons, and I found those lessons very hard to learn. So I thought with this Let's Play, I can give you some tips and tricks for starting the game, a walkthrough of that first island so you can get off into the main section of the game, which is a more open world, and teach you about some of the core systems of the game. All right, let's dive in now. The first choice we will be faced with is whether to play real-time with pause or turn-based mode. Real-time with pause is the way the game was designed to be played. Turn-based mode was added much later after the release of the game. I think it was added on like the final patch. Now, in my opinion, both of these modes are fine. They're both good to play. Turn-based mode is definitely worse, but it's still very good. The combat system in this game is incredible, even in turn-based mode. I recommend, however, you play real-time with pause. It's just what the game was designed for, and it really feels that way as you play it. Now, if you're the kind of person who does not like real-time with pause and greatly prefers turn-based, by all means play turn-based mode, but still my recommendation is to at least try real-time with pause. I'm going to teach you some tips in this video to make real-time with pause more manageable for people who find it difficult. So for this run, we're doing real-time with pause. Of course, there's standard difficulty settings: story, relax, classic, veteran, and Paths of the Damned. These days, I play exclusively Paths of the Damned and Trial of Iron. Trial of Iron is kind of like the honor mode version of this game, where you have a single save, and if you die, that save is deleted. The game is very manageable in Paths of the Damned. It's not actually that difficult of a setting. That said, for everyone that is new to this game, I recommend you start with Classic, or if you are an experienced tactical player, maybe Veteran. I started by playing on Veteran, and at the time, I had about 700 hours in Pillars of Eternity 1, so I figured Veteran would be a breeze, but it actually wasn't for me. Basically, even if you have a lot of knowledge of the system, it doesn't mean you have a lot of knowledge of the game. And if you just think back to Baldur's Gate 3 and my videos for that, a lot of the choices I make in my runs have to do with meta knowledge of the game, not just the system. Choices like which quests to do in what order, which units I know to focus down in combat, which magical items are going to synergize with class features, and things like that. For your first playthrough, you won't have that knowledge, and that's the kind of knowledge you need to make Paths of the Damned difficulty manageable. So I'm recommending either Classic or Veteran. For this Let's Play, we're going to do Veteran. Then there's also these modifications down here. We already talked about Trial of Iron. There's also Expert Mode. This mode is supposed to make the game more immersive by disabling a lot of the helper features which give you meta information. I gotta be honest, I've tried expert mode and I cannot stand it. I find those helper features to just be massive quality of life boosts for gameplay, so I actually don't recommend doing expert mode, but if you're someone who is very sensitive to immersion, you could try it and see if you like it. And then finally, there are what are called Bareth's Blessings. If you are doing your first run, you won't have any of these unlocked, because what happens is you unlock points to buy blessings as you unlock achievements, like Steam achievements in the game. So I've done most of the Steam achievements, which gives me 95 points, which to buy some of these buffs, and you can see some of them will give you more starting money. There's things like this where you get a +2 to every attribute. That's huge. You can make insanely powerful characters with this. You can get upgrades to your ship. You can unlock a vendor who sells certain unique items at the very beginning of the game. Some of them really just change the gameplay, like Loaded Pockets, which fills the pockets of the NPCs of the game with more valuable items, which makes a pickpocketing run more fun. It's really just things like that. I love using these. I think a lot of them are just really fun. But since a beginner to the game won't have access to any of them, we're not going to do any of them for this run. So these are the difficult settings we will be playing under. Oh, I forgot upscaling. I always turn upscaling on. I find it makes the game more enjoyable. Upscaling just will scale the stats of enemies up if you are over leveled to them, which in an open world game is actually quite important. I've done one playthrough without upscaling and it just became so easy because I was so over leveled by the end of the game. And then we're going to press start and skip intro. The intro of the game just it gives you a little cinematic to explain what's immediately happened to connect this game to the events of Pillars of Eternity 1. Definitely watch the intro if you're new to this game. We are going to skip it though. And here we start with character creation. There's an unusual start to the character creation. We are in the realm of the dead and are speaking to the god of death in this game, Bareth. Well, it's god or goddess. Bareth has two aspects. This armored woman and this robed dwarf. Both of them are the same being. This is our disembodied soul. In this game, souls are a big part of the metaphysics of the game, and reincarnation is a big part of the metaphysics of the game. So we're going through a process of reincarnation right now. Our next big decision is to choose a history. A history is a record of all of the choices that you made in Pillars of Eternity 1, which are going to impact the world of Pillars of Eternity 2. You can make certain custom presets if you'd like. I've made several here. You can do that in the Options tab on the main menu. You can import saves that you've completed of Pillars of Eternity 1. So here are some of my finished saves of that game that I could import. Or you can choose any of the presets that they have made, which are marked with these. I recommend choosing Benevolent Soul. That's what we're going to do in this run. So there's a dialogue now where Bareth, the god of death, talks to us about the decisions that we made in Pillars of Eternity 1. Once you go through that, eventually she will give you the option to remember your face, and that is when we get into character creation proper. We can either import a character or start from scratch. We're, of course, starting from scratch. The first mechanical choice that we get to make is our race. Many of these races you will recognize from D&D or Baldur's Gate 3. It's classics like human, elf, dwarf, but then there are also some races that are unique to the Pillars of Eternity setting, like Amawa. This is the big race of the game. Amawa are semi-aquatic people that live often on coasts and islands. Then there are Orlan. Orlan are the shorty race of this game. And then finally, there is godlike, which are the most unique both visually and mechanically. Godlike aren't actually a race, they're technically a condition that any race can have. So you can see, you can choose to be an Amawa godlike, dwarf godlike, elf godlike, you get the idea. Godlikes are specially chosen by the gods for reasons that are not clear. The appearance of a godlike will depend on which god has chosen them. So for example, right now in the game we are speaking to Bareth, the god of death, and you could be a godlike of Bareth called a death godlike that looks something like this. What makes godlike very different mechanically is all of them get very powerful racial abilities, but it's balanced because they are unable to wear helmets. As you can see, all of these options have very heavily altered heads, and so you cannot really expect to have a helmet that fits you, and that's how they represent it in the game. For our build, we are going to pick Orlan because we really want the +2 perception that Orlans get, and we're going to pick Hearth Orlan. Hearth Orlan get the minor threat power, which makes it so if they are attacking a target that is threatened by an ally, some of their hits will be converted to crits. So this is kind of like crit chance from Baldur's Gate 3. Minor threat isn't particularly strong, but our build, as you're going to see, functions around attacking enemies threatened by an ally. So this synergizes really well for us. Then you'll get a choice between single class and multi-class. The multi-class system in this game is very different than the modular system used in Baldur's Gate 3 and 5th edition D&D. In the modular system, every level you could potentially pick a new class, right? And you can think of levels as a resource which you spend to buy levels in a class. That is not how multi-class works in this game. How multi-class works in this game is you will select 2 of the classes of the game. A mix of those 2 classes become your class. I'll explain more as we continue. We are actually going to pick multi-class for this build, and our first class is going to be Cypher. If you look over this class list, you'll recognize a lot of classics of the genre like Paladin, Monk, Fighter, Priest, Ranger, Rogue, Wizard, etc. There are 2 classes that are unique to this setting though, and one of them is Cypher. Cyphers are a kind of psionic mage. They use a magic which exclusively targets the minds of creatures. They have a lot of potent crowd control on enemies, including charms, and then they have a lot of very potent buffs for your allies as well. Cyphers are also interesting in that the resource that they use to cast spells, called Focus, they gain it by attacking with their weapons. So they're naturally a Gish class. In order to cast spells, you first have to deal damage with your weapons. If you press Preview Ability Tree, the game will show you all of the abilities and passives that you'll have access to if you select this class. You can scroll over these to plan ahead on your builds. Just bear in mind that multi-class builds cannot unlock these last 2 tiers, Tier 8 and Tier 9. These 2 tiers of abilities are exclusively accessed by single class builds. So we pick Cypher, and then we get to pick a subclass. Some of these subclasses are very cool. We will pick the Ascendant subclass. This slightly alters the way we cast spells. A normal Cypher will gain focus as they make attacks, and then they can spend that focus whenever they want. How the Ascendant works is that depending on how much focus you have, you'll have one of 2 conditions. Either you are not Ascended, in which case your spells are nerfed, or you reach Ascended, in which case your spells are significantly buffed. You can reach Ascended as soon as you get max focus. So it creates a rhythm for this class where instead of mixing in attacks with spells, you actually want to go through a phase where you attack a lot until you reach maximum focus, and then you cast as many spells as you can while you have the Ascended buff. It's actually very powerful and very fun. We're going to use it in this run. And then we get to pick our first power or spell. I recommend choosing Whispers of Treason. This is your first charm spell in the game, and it's extremely powerful for being level 1. Next comes the second class in our multi, and we are going to pick Ranger. The combination of Ranger and Chanter is called a Seer, as you can see in these brackets. If we preview our ability tree now, you can see we can swap between the trees of Cypher and Ranger. And that is because as we level, we will be able to choose any of the powers of either of these classes. However, our power level, represented by these tiers, progresses slower than if we are a single class. At max level 20, we will max out at power level 7. Power level not only affects the power of the abilities you can unlock as you level, it also enhances your abilities. So power level functions a little bit like proficiency bonus in Baldur's Gate 3 and 5th edition, in that it's a reference stat that increases as you level, but is not identical to your level. Unlike proficiency bonus, power level affects almost everything that you do with your class in the game. So as your power level increases, all of these abilities and passives you can unlock will increase in power. So the trade-off for multi-class is that they get less power level, but more abilities to choose from. And in theory, that's better if the abilities that you choose from 2 different classes synergize well enough to offset the inherent disadvantage of being a lower power level. The big synergy that we want is that the core Cypher class that we picked gets a lot of really powerful single target spells. Spells like Puppet Master, which will dominate a single target. They'll also get really powerful damaging spells like Disintegration at late game. This deals a ton of raw damage, and raw damage cannot be mitigated. That means as long as you are able to hit this spell, you will be able to kill enemies in this game. Really, the only way to avoid it is to not get hit. The Ranger class that we're mixing with this gets a ton of features that improve your accuracy, making you very likely to hit. Abilities like Mark Prey, which will give you +10 accuracy. Stalker's Link, this will give you plus 10 accuracy when you're attacking the same target as your animal companion. And remember, we had Minor Threat from being a Hearth Orland, which also will improve our chance to crit when we're attacking the same target. Hunter's Claw will give us a stackable accuracy boost against a certain race in the game. Survival of the Fittest gives us more accuracy against below health targets. When you add up all of the accuracy between these two classes, you can be giving yourself a bonus of plus 50 to 60, which is massive. Makes you very, very likely to hit. That's kind of the core synergy we are going to be building around for this. So we'll pick Ranger. For subclass of Ranger, I recommend picking no subclasses. They have some interesting subclasses that all have strengths but also weaknesses. And just for the sake of making this build easy, I recommend no subclasses. We're going to pick the Marked Prey ability for the bonus accuracy, and then we have to pick an animal companion. This is something all Rangers get, and it's exclusive to them. There are lots of options, and they are not just cosmetic. Each of them will have different boosts. There are 3 that stand out above the others, in my opinion, and they are Wolf, Lion, and Bear. Bear is the best mix of tankiness to damage in the game, so if you want an animal companion that also tanks for you, Bear is the way to go. Wolf and Lion are the 2 highest damage animal companions, and they do pretty much the same amount. Technically, Wolf is slightly better in a pure DPS perspective, but the Lion attacks faster, which makes it more reactive, and really, while it's doing less, it's like 3% less or something like that, so it's really negligible. For our run, though, I'm going to pick the Wolf. Of course, we get to name it. And then we get to our attributes. This is one of the funnest parts of this game. The attribute system they designed is a masterclass. You have 6 attributes, just like D&D or Baldur's Gate 3, and many of them are really just a 1-to-1 comparison. So for example, there's Might instead of Strength, Constitution is the same, Dexterity is the same, Intellect instead of Intelligence. The 2 new ones are Perception, which is somewhat similar to Wisdom from D&D, and then there is Resolve, which is somewhat similar to Charisma for D&D. What's different is that each of these attributes will give you bonuses that are class agnostic. Right, so in Baldur's Gate 3, for example, you pretty much don't want intelligence unless you are an intelligence caster like a wizard. Most classes just don't use intelligence at all. That is not how intelligence works in this game. If I scroll over it here, you can see for each +1 point of intellect, I am increasing the area of effect of my spells and also the duration of those spells and abilities. It will also give me a plus to my will defense. And that is how all of the attributes work. So if we go through them one by one, Might increases your damage and healing values and your fortitude defense. Constitution increases your health and also your fortitude as well. Dexterity increases your action speed. This just, in real time with pause, this just affects how quickly you do any action, whether it's an attack or a spell. It also increases your reflex defense. Perception increases your accuracy and your reflex. Accuracy affects all targeted abilities in this game, whether it's a spell or whether it's a weapon attack. We are going to max out our perception because we really want accuracy in this build. 18 is the highest you can go at character creation, but we get a +2 for being Orlan, so that gives us a 20 max. We already talked about intelligence, which increases the area of effect and duration of your abilities and spells. This is all abilities and spells and that have a duration. So if you cast Fireball, this will include the area of effect of your Fireball spell. But if you're a fighter and you do a sweep attack with your sword, Intellect will increase the area of effect of that sweep attack as well. We also want to max out Intellect. Intellect scales really well with our Cypher abilities. It'll increase the duration of our charms and also the duration of our Disintegration spell, which basically increases its damage. I'm actually going to lower our Constitution in order to max out Intellect. Constitution isn't important for us because it's mostly a durability stat, and we're going to invest nothing into durability. Even if we had Constitution at 10, we would still die in like 3 hits. So most of what we're trying to do is avoid being hit, so it's worth minimizing our constitution to max our intellect. Finally, resolve. Resolve is another very tanky durability stat. It reduces the duration of hostile CC effects and debuffs on you. It also increases your deflection. Deflection is like armor class, and it will increase your will defense. If you wanted to, you could minimize resolve. Subtracting resolve will increase the duration of hostile effects on us, which can really be a bummer, but like I said, we're mostly just trying to avoid things anyways. If you wanted to, you could put that into dexterity so we cast spells and attack faster, and then whatever is left you can either put in might or resolve. It doesn't really matter. The really important things for this build is for us to max perception and intellect. Finally, you get to choose your cultural background and what your profession is. For each of these cultural backgrounds, it will increase your stats by +1. So Deadfire gives you +1 to dexterity, Rauatai gives you +1 to constitution, Old Valia gives you +1 to intelligence. You get the idea. We are going to pick the Wipe That Wens because it gives us a +1 to perception. Bear in mind, if you want to pick one of these cultures just because you think it sounds cool, just do it. A +1 isn't that big of a boost. And then we'll pick our profession, and we are going to pick Mystic because we want the +1 to metaphysics. As I'll show you in the game, metaphysics will be important for us. Weapon proficiencies, I'm not going to talk about these that much, but these are modals which you can turn on and off to affect your attacks. They do various things depending on the weapon. I recommend picking the hunting bow and the pistol because we are going to be a ranged build, and both of these share the same modal, which decreases our accuracy with our weapon attacks, but greatly increases the speed at which we attack, and the trade-off is worth it. It will increase our damage by a lot, especially if we can offset the accuracy penalty, which we've already been doing by increasing our accuracy through perception and through picking the ranger class, right? And then you just get into cosmetic character creation. You can pick a portrait, clothing colors, skin color, hair color, eye color. Your face can change, or your hairstyle, and then you'll pick a voice, and this one is cool and unique to this game. You can pick a pose. This is basically what your character will be doing when you're idling or when you're talking to people. So for example, you can be stoic, drunk, pious. In our case, we are going to pick erudite. And then you name yourself and you are done with your character. Let's dive into gameplay. Now, sadly, just as we regain consciousness, our boat is attacked by pirates. We're going to need to fight them off, and that means we'll need weapons, which we can find in this armoire. If you press I, you'll be taken to your inventory, where we can equip our weapons. We'll take a single pistol in our main weapon slot, and then the hunting bow in our second weapon slot. And then we have to make a choice about armor. If you right click, you can see what armor gives you. This basic mail armor will set our armor rating to 7. How armor rating works is that each attack or spell that hits you and deals damage, it will compare that attack's penetration value to your armor rating. If their penetration value is greater than your armor rating, it will deal damage as normal. If it is less than your armor rating, it will deal significantly reduced damage depending on how much less it is. So basically, armor rating reduces damage, and it can reduce damage by a lot. For each set of armor that you wear, it'll have a base armor rating, and then it will be weak to 2 types of damage. In the case of mail armor, it's weak to crush and freeze. So you can see against these, its armor rating is 5 instead of 7. And that means for enemies, you can try to attack the weak points in their armor by varying your damage types. And then it will come with a recovery time penalty. This is pretty much what it sounds like. It's just going to slow down all of the actions you take by this percentage. So if you right click on your weapons, you will see your attack stats here. You can see unarmored, we have an attack time of 0.9 seconds and a reload time of 4 seconds. So rounding up, we will attack roughly once every 5 seconds. If we turn on our rushed reload modal, which speeds up our attacks, you can see we now have an attack time of 9 seconds, but a reload time of 2.2. Now, if I put on this armor, that reload time of 2.2 goes up to a reload time of 2.4. And it's really just a question for you of whether you want to act faster or whether you want to be more durable with your armor. In our case, I'm actually going to leave the armor off. All right, now we are ready to fight these pirates. All right, I'm on main deck now, parlaying with these pirates. And here's a good time to introduce dialogue. Dialogue is the same as like what you would see in Baldur's Gate 3, except without the cinematics. But what's different about this game are these little meta information tabs, which describe the kind of reputation you will gain if you choose these options. So, for example, I could say, I don't have any quarrel with you, and this is a diplomatic response. If you choose enough diplomatic responses, people in the world will start to recognize you as diplomatic, and that will adjust the way they speak to you and the way they deal with you in general. It's also just a good way to think about the personality of your character. I can think, is my character diplomatic? Are they clever? Clever lines often give the game a kind of Guardians of the Galaxy feel, where you're a band of goofy heroes that are wisecracking while trying to save the world. Is my character aggressive? Stoic? You get to choose. You can also see there are some options that I don't meet the requirements for. The specific requirement is in the bracket here. In this case, I am not an aristocrat. I didn't choose the aristocrat background, so I don't get this one. I'm also not a mercenary, so I don't get this option. There are dialogue options that are unlocked depending on your race, your class, your background, your reputation. This kind of meta information is part of what is disabled if you pick expert mode. Alright, now we have to fight these pirates, and we are into combat. Remember that we picked real time with pause, and now is a good time for me to teach you about some of the helper features to make real time with pause more manageable. The first is combat speed slider, which you can see down here. It's very easy to miss. This will affect how much combat is slowed down, and if you're just starting, it's going to be right here in the middle, in which combat goes at this pace. You can slow it down. If we slow it down to max, you can see it goes at this pace. As you can imagine, slowing down combat makes it much more manageable. You don't need quite the same reaction time. You can see things happen at a pace that is much easier to process. So if you're someone who gets overwhelmed with the real time with pause, I recommend slowing it down to a level that works for you. For me, just for the fineness of control, I prefer to have the speed at second from the lowest. The second feature that makes combat more manageable is, of course, AI, which you can turn on here. But the important feature is in your character sheet. So if you press hotkey C, underneath your portrait is this button, which says AI behavior. If you click on that, we can open the behavior editor and start creating new behavior sets. The system for creating behavior sets is very comprehensive, and if you master it, you can make combat much easier by automating a lot of the things you just do every combat. So for example, we'll set one new custom command. You start with your conditional. You can see there are lots of options. We're going to pick health, self, and then go below 25%. That is when we're near death. So we now have a conditional of whenever we drop below 25%, and then something is going to happen. In our case, we're going to pick the second wind ability. This is an ability we get that scales with our athletic skill, and it will heal us. So now with this custom conditional, whenever I drop below 25%, I will automatically use second wind and heal myself. We can press accept, select the seer behavior that we just customized, save, And now, if I enable my AI, my character will then heal themselves whenever they drop below 25%. And as you can imagine, if you make lots and lots of these conditionals, you can automate a lot of the things that you would just do mechanically every single encounter, which frees up your attention and bandwidth to focus on the actual tactics of a combat. I recommend you experimenting with this if real-time with pause is something that overwhelms you. Finally, we can also do the classic queuing actions. So remember, we have this ability called Marked Prey, which will increase our accuracy. We're going to mark prey, and then if I hold down Shift and press attack, my character will attack immediately after they marked prey. So now we can unpause. There you go. Now, I've been low rolling this fight and missing a lot, which is a shame. But I've now finally dealt enough damage to gain Ascended. If I scroll over my buffs, which appear beside my portrait on the main screen, you can see I have acquired the Ascended buff for 20.5 seconds. For the next 20.5 seconds, I gain +3 to the power level of my Cypher spells, which greatly buffs the accuracy of the spells, the damage of those spells, the duration of the spells. It just basically makes them better, which is very cool. It also reduces the cost of the Cypher abilities by 100%, which means for 20.5 seconds, I can cast as many Cypher spells as I want for free. You can see the cost here is reduced to 0. But sadly, at this point of the fight, there's only one target left, and charming him would be pretty much useless, so we'll just kill him now. Okay, so we managed to fend off the pirates, but not the storm, and now our ship is wrecked on this island. We're going to have to try to repair our ship and get off this island, which is what we're going to do in this Let's Play. Eder is going to speak to us. He will be the first companion we gain. Each time you gain a new companion, you get to make a choice. There will be 3 options of what class you want them to be. And these options will depend on the companion. So it just gives you a little bit of class customization for each companion. For Eder, he can be either a single class fighter, a single class rogue, or a swashbuckler, which is a multi-class of fighter and rogue. Any of these options are good, but I like Eder to be my front line. I'm going to pick Swashbuckler. Fighter and Rogue is a very potent combination. If you want to preview the class trees, you can look at them here. So I'm going to pick Swashbuckler here. And we're level 1, so I don't really get to make any choices. We now find ourselves on this beach. Now, one thing I love about this game is how beautiful it is. I find it absolutely incredible, and I think most of my listeners don't know this about me, but I was actually raised in the tropics. So the place where I grew up is very similar in appearance to this place, and that always makes it kind of special to me. I've been on many beaches just like this. Alright, we have a combat now against a young boar. So before I attack, I actually want to mark target and then shift input attack command. I'm going to get my wolf to attack too. And we really want to flank this target. So I'm going to shift Eder around, and now you can see the target is flanked. Flanked is going to lower his armor class, or what they call deflection in this game, and also his armor rating, which means we're more likely to penetrate his armor. Now here's a good time to talk about the fundamental attacking system of the game. Down here is a log of everything that happens in combat. You can see I just got 20 experience for killing that boar, and I killed it with a hit of my pistol. If you scroll over this entry where I hit, it will show you the particular math of the hit. So you can see I have a 38 accuracy, and then it subtracts the target's deflection, which is 20. 38 minus 20 is, of course, 18, and that is added to my attack roll, which the attack roll is made on a D100, not a D20 like in Baldur's Gate 3. In this case, I rolled a 66 plus 18, which results in an 84, an 84 is a hit. And this is the fundamental math of all attacks made in the game, whether it's a spell attack to charm a target, or a spell attack to deal damage like with Fireball, or a basic weapon attack like with this pistol. All of them use this function. They will use your accuracy and subtract it from the relevant defense. If it's a weapon attack, that defense is deflection. If it's an attack to charm a target, it will probably be their will defense. You get the idea. And then that's added to your D100 roll, and whether it hits, crits, grazes, or misses will depend on your result. So after all of that math, if your result is 1 to 24, that is a miss. If it's 25 to 49, that is called a graze. A graze deals damage, but significantly reduced damage. If it's a result of 50 to 100, like mine was just now with the 84, that is a hit. A hit deals damage as normal. And then if it is 100 plus, that is a crit. Crits deal increased damage, but also have increased penetration, so they're more likely to penetrate the armor value of your enemies. If you graze or crit with a spell that doesn't deal damage, like when I'm trying to charm a target, it will instead either reduce or increase the duration of that CC effect. So if I cast Whispers of Treason and I graze, it will be a reduced charm. If I crit, it will be an increased charm. And of course, missing is the same. Nothing happens at all. Another thing, while we're exploring, I recommend pressing F. This will speed up your walking speed. Just makes the game move faster. Fast mode can be toggled, like I said, with F or down here. Here's a member of our crew. We're going to need them if we want to sail off this island. So that's one member of our crew found. There's many more we'll want to find on this beach. That is a spirit of a dead person. We can see spirits of the dead because we are a watcher. A watcher is just a special kind of magic in this world. It's very rare, but our main character is one. You can see here's another spirit here. Now we've heard that Beedol is trapped inside this cave, and this cave kind of serves as the first introductory dungeon that you can explore. Now, one little trick that is important is if you press Alt, you will go into stealth mode. Stealth mode actually increases the speed and recovery of your actions. So if you see, if I right click this, scroll over reload time, I'm getting a minus 85% from stealth. I use stealth to control which character the enemies aggro. So Eder is kind of like my tank. I want the enemies to attack him. So the AI will naturally target him since he's the only one they can see. And now that they're attacking him, they kind of tend to get locked in place. Because my perception's so high, I'm spotting a lot of traps. So I want to disarm these traps now. And now I have found the last member of my crew on this beach, and that gave us enough experience to level up. So let's talk about leveling up now. You'll make a few decisions when you level up. The first is with your skills. You will be given 1 skill point for your active skills and 1 for your passive skills. Active skills are skills that have direct combat value. You can use them in fights. At least that is true for all of them except mechanics and sleight of hand. Mechanics is the skill you need to disarm traps. That's what I was just using to disarm the traps. It's always useful to have at least one member of your party that maxes out mechanics. I'm probably going to do that on my main character here. And then there are passive skills. Passive skills have no direct combat. They're only used outside of combat for dialogue choices and stuff like that. We are going to pick metaphysics because it actually will have use in combat based on the magic weapon that we're going to find. I'll show you in a bit. And then we are going to have one ability that we can select. It's one for now. Each time you unlock a new power level, you will actually get 2 abilities to select. If you are a multi-class, you will get 1 ability per class. If you're a single class, you'll just get 2 for your single class. This ability point we can use to unlock a spell or ability, an active spell or ability, or a passive one. You can right click on these to see exactly what they do. So for example, Iron Will give us a plus 15 to our will defense. That is quite good. You can think of a 15 as being kind of equivalent to a plus 3 to that defense if this was in the D20 system of Baldur's Gate 3, right? Anyways, for us, we want to spend this ability improving our animal companion. We want to take either Vicious Companion first or Resilient Companion first. Resilient Companion increases the armor of our companion. Vicious increases the penetration and damage. Let's start with Vicious for this one. And that is the level. Now, what you can see here is those targets try to run past Eder when he has engaged them. If targets that you've engaged walk out of melee distance from you, you will get what's called a disengagement attack, which is basically an attack of opportunity. What's different between disengagement attacks and attacks of opportunity is they're actually boosted. You can see this disengagement attack gave me plus 100% to damage. I also got a plus 20 to accuracy, which makes it more likely to hit and crit. They are actually massive, and farming disengagement attacks is a big strategy in this game. Alright, so we've rescued as much of the crew as survived our shipwreck, and now it's time for us to explore this island and see if we can find help or supplies to repair our boat. You can leave the island by clicking on this little compass symbol here. I said leave the island, but really you're just leaving the beach, which is called Valario's Rest. This will take you to the overworld, which is an open overworld. It's an open world map that you can explore. For now, though, we're stuck to this island because we have no boat. Here are some fruit trees. We get some fresh fruit from them. And here is Port Maje, the main port on this island. Okay. So we found a little bit of civilization on this island, and the governor of the Valian trading company who runs this town has asked to speak with us. We'll go speak with him in a second. Usually what I start by doing is going down here to speak to these missionaries that we recently rescued. This will get us our second companion, Xoti. Xoti is a priest of Gon. I don't want to get into all the details here, but being a priest of Gon is a very interesting thing to be based on the events of Pillars of Eternity 1. Just like before, we can pick between 3 options: priest, monk, or contemplative. You can preview the ability tree down here, but notice that she has a subclass for each of these, which Eder did not. If you choose priest, you will get the Harvester of Gon subclass. If you choose monk, the Sister of the Reaping Moon, and Contemplative, I believe, has both subclasses. If we click Preview Ability Tree, up here it shows us the bonuses of the subclass. Basically, we gain proficiency in the hatchet, which is their kind of priestly weapon, and then a list of bonus spells we can choose from. Some of these spells are spells a normal priest would get, and some of them are spells you exclusively get if you are this subclass. For example, the Blessed Harvest spell. This is exclusive to Xoti and her subclass, and it's extremely good. It will deal a ton of single target slash damage that targets the Fortitude defense, and even more damage if that target is bloodied or near death. Anyways, I recommend picking single class priest for Xoti. So now we have 2 companions, and it's a good time for us to visit Governor Clario. You can find his estate up here, but I might as well loot all of these bushes while I'm here. Governor Clario is willing to help us repair our ship to get off this island if we do him a favor first, which is visit an luminous Audra Digsite, which has recently been destroyed under mysterious circumstances. Next thing I want to do is visit this tavern so we have a place to rest. I also want to hire a new hireling. Sadly, for a room to rest, there are none available unless we evict a lousy tenant that is refusing to pay. You just have to speak to him. You can evict him in several ways depending on how you think your character would handle the situation. And with that, we have gotten enough experience to level up. I'll show you the level up for your main character here. If you're following this build, I want to always put into metaphysics and mechanics for my skills. And then for my abilities, I want to take Resilient Companion. Anyways, we've evicted Galleon and we can now collect our quest reward. That completes the task. I also want to talk to him to hire a new mercenary for my party. This introduced the Mercenary System. For an upfront cost, depending on the level, you can hire a new party member up to one level below yours. So since I'm level 3, I can recruit a level 2 adventurer. And there you go, I now have an extra companion. Now all that's left to do is to collect as much experience as we can by completing all of the tasks on this island, and of course the main quest that gets us off this island. So I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of how you can easily complete all of the tasks. The first quest you can find in the Port Maje jail, which is right here. If you talk to the captain of the guard, Savia, she will give you your quest. She has given me a quest called Restoring Order, where I have to remove people that are looting corpses from the storm in Xoti Street. We'll do that one in a bit. You can also talk to this guy right here. If you free him from prison, he will agree to join your crew. We aren't going to free him right now. So that's the first quest. The second quest you can unlock by going down here and going into Rinko's home. Rinko has recently been mugged, and he wants you to retrieve the coin purse that was stolen from him. But the first thing I always do when entering his home is quickly steal everything he has. You can find Rinko in here. Alright, to complete these quests, we're going to have to leave the main town of Port Maje. Now there are two ways to leave. You can leave up here, clicking this compass, or you can leave down here, clicking this one. You want to click this one. This is actually very important. First, we're going to go to Xoti Street to clear out the looters. Now this is a very frustrating quest because if we become visible, you can see I'm stealthing right now, but if these looters see us, they will attack us. And the fight that ensues is practically impossible to beat at the level that you encounter this quest. And the reason that is the game is trying to teach you that you shouldn't solve all quests violently. If you stay in stealth mode and entered from this area, which is why we wanted to leave from the bottom of the town. If we left from the top of the main town, we would be entering here, and sneaking is much more difficult. But from here, if we sneak, we can sneak right past these looters without them seeing us, regardless of whether we've invested in stealth or not. This is just to teach you a lesson. You don't want to fight every fight. Some of these fights are too difficult for you, and you want to sneak past them. So if we sneak past and talk to Alari, we can either bribe him or convince him to leave. And now the looters are gone, and we've solved the quest. Alright, and now we can leave the flooded area from the top, and we want to go to Satahuzi. Satahuzi is where the native Amawa tribes stay. So Port Maje is the local port from the colonial Valian trading company. The actual locals to this island live in Satahuzi. Now in Satahuzi there is a vendor we can buy stuff from, and then there is Mokeha, that's who we want to talk to. Mokeha is the person who robbed Rinko. We just have to convince her to give the purse back, and this will introduce some of the culture clash between the locals of the Deadfire and the colonial powers. Alright, just by talking to her I managed to get the purse back. We can loot some of these plants that aren't stealing. If you want to, you can loot a lot of things from these buildings as well. And now it's back to Port Maje. We are going to start by going to Rinko's home. You can see when I click Port Maje Harbor area, it will drop down a menu of the locations there. If you click Rinko's home, it will take you directly to Rinko's home. Alright, I've now returned the coin purse. Go back up to the jail here. And that completed the Xoti Street quest. If we talk to her again, now that she likes us because we did her a favor, she will lower Rigeri's fine to 300 copper, which we can pay. And now Rigeri is free, and he will join our crew at Valario's Rest. Alright, so we've completed all of the major tasks. all that's left in our journal is to go to the Digsite. That's the next big thing that we have to do. To do that, we have to leave town, but we've also gotten some gold from doing these quests. We can talk to Henrik to spend some of it. So you can see, just like any normal vendor, you can buy weapons and armor, but most vendors in this game will have a collection of unique magical items and equipment. In the case of Henrik, he has the Essence Interrupter bow, the Shattered Vengeance club, and this Physicker's belt. You can right click on them to see what they do. I want to show you guys the Essence Interrupter, because this is a bow we will eventually want to buy when we can afford it, and it's going to be the main weapon we use on this run. It is an exceptional hunting bow. Exceptional is kind of like being a +2 weapon, and interestingly, it does piercing damage and shock damage. It will do whichever one is best. This is important for hunting bow strategies because shock is a damage type that is unlikely to be resistant, where pierce damage is. All skeletons are immune to piercing damage, just for example. If we scroll down, we can see some of the effects of this weapon. Here, it explains that it does best at pierce and shock. Experimental souls, critical hits with this weapon, will impose a condition where, when the target dies with that condition, a random creature will be summoned in their place that will be both hostile to you and your enemies. Magical weapons and armor will also have an enchant tab. If we click on that, you can see the various ways that you can upgrade the weapon. So all weapons and armor can be upgraded in terms of quality. The Essence Interrupter starts as exceptional, but if you have the right gold and ingredients, you can improve it to superb, which is kind of like being a +3, and then finally to legendary, which is kind of like being a +4 weapon. You can see a legendary weapon gets +60% to its damage, +15 to its accuracy, and +4 to its penetration. And then there are these unique enchantments. So for example, you can choose between electrical conduit and thermal conduit. These will both increase your damage. Electrical conduit will give you a +5% shock damage to your attacks, and thermal burn damage to your attacks, but both of them increase with your metaphysics skill. Basically, the more you understand about metaphysics, the better you're able to use this weapon. And that's why we've been investing in metaphysics. With a high enough metaphysics, this +5 can go as high as like +20, if I'm remembering correctly. You can also get soul diplomacy or tethered souls. Soul diplomacy makes it so the random creature that summons whenever you kill the target will now be hostile to your enemies but allied to you. So basically you get an allied summon now. I recommend that one. Tethered soul increases the duration that that creature is summoned for, but again, it could be both hostile to you or your enemies. Anyways, Essence Interrupter is an amazing bow where we eventually want to buy, but you can see now we don't have near enough gold. I just wanted to show it to you to introduce magic weapons and the way they work. Alright guys, with our shopping done, it's now time to solve the big problem we need to face, which is to investigate this Luminous Audra dig site. We'll want to leave town, and then we'll want to say leave by foot. That'll take us to this overworld where we want to go this way to the Ingwithan dig site. We got some experience from reaching here, and we can now level up. Again, always metaphysics and mechanics. And now at level 4 as a multi-class, we've unlocked our power level 2 abilities. There's lots of amazing spells and features, but the number one we want to pick is Draining Whip. This will increase the amount of focus that we gain with each attack, allowing us to reach Ascended status much quicker. It's very important to pick Draining Whip. And then we can also pick a new passive or active as our Ranger. I'm going to take the Marksman passive, which increases the accuracy of our ranged weapon attacks against distant targets. For weapon proficiencies, just choose something that you like. Alright, level ups are done now. So this dig site can be very difficult if you are new to the game. I recommend going up from where you enter. Of course, loot everything along the way. Then you're going to want to go down this ladder. And here is where I enter stealth mode with the Alt hotkey, because down here is a potential fight. You don't want to aggro it right away. You could enter the Ancient Training Hall, but there you will encounter some skeletons which are very difficult to fight. I don't recommend fighting them. Here's a cat. Actually, I'll just go to my inventory. This cat, Gosha, will give us +1 to our perception, which we prefer. So I'm going to equip that cat instead of Cosmo. Now, here's a fight against some worms, which are like baby dragons, and there's also some boars that will aggro in this fight. It can be very difficult. You can sometimes sneak past it. I'll show you here. You can see I've just managed to sneak past. Sneaking past this fight can definitely be worth it if you're having a difficult time. We're just going to go ahead and fight it though. Once you get past this fight, the important thing is that you don't walk down into this area. That will proc a very difficult fight with a Drake that we'd rather just stealth past. You don't actually get experience from killing monsters in this game. I mean, you kind of do. I can just show you here. What happens is you get experience from unlocking entries in your bestiary. You can see I've already started to acquire information, but not all the information on these creatures. There's a lot of question marks here. You unlock information the more of them you kill, and you get experience for each tier that you unlock. However, once you've fully unlocked one of these creatures, you could kill 1,000 of them and you'll never get experience again. That means you're incentivized more to resolve quests for experience than farm combat for experience, and that's why sneaking past a lot of these fights is worth it in the long run. Okay, so now I just cleared this luminous Audra pool area. That one has a very easy fight. You can definitely clear it at this level. I recommend do not going into the Ancient Training Hall. Technically this is the same area as this up here. It's the one with all the skeletons, very high level, difficult for us to fight. We will take care of them after we're done this quest and when we level up. However, you can go into the Foreman's Quarters. That is a fight that's easy enough for us to take at this level. Alright, now I've mostly taken care of everything that I need to at this level. To finish the quest, we need to go into the Arena Sublevel. Now, down here, as I've told you, is a fight with a Drake, which is kind of like this world's version of a Wyvern. It's a very difficult enemy to fight at this level, so it's best if we just sneak past, stay in stealth mode, and just click the Arena Sublevel, and you can see we easily sneak past. And now we are in the Arena Sublevel. This is the first kind of major dungeon that you have to do. There's lots of fights, and I'll mostly just let you experiment with those. If you cleared the Foreman's Quarters and you click on this, you can place the Champion's Medallion, which will unlock a special room here. That's just something to keep in mind. So I recommend killing all of the enemies in this area. Good luck with that. I'll just skip past all of this part. Alright, so now I have cleared this dungeon. If we just look at our map now, there's several rooms with some minor fights and loot that you can clear. I hope you had fun dealing with all those. And then to solve this quest, you must go over here to find this corpse, and he will have notes that you are supposed to bring back to Port Maje. That will initiate a plot dialogue as well. I'll just skip past that. Alright, and from there we can just leave this dungeon. Alright, so now that we've gotten Odorisi's notes, the Drake mob that was here that we avoided is now gone. All of the Animancers who locked themselves in this cage for safety are out, and this guy right here is the 5th and final companion we're going to add to our party. So this is Aloth, another returning companion from Pillars of Eternity 1. Aloth is a wizard, but you can also build him as a battle mage, which is the fighter wizard combo, and a spellblade, which is the wizard rogue combo. All three of these are good, but I usually prefer to keep him as a single class wizard. And now that we have a full party, we can finish looting this place. Don't forget that we left this ancient training hall. There are still some skeletons and some pretty good loot we can find in there. I recommend doing all of that now that you have a full party. And when you are done clearing all of this area of loot, you can just leave. The fastest way is up here. And we're going to go back to Port Maje. And here we are back at the beach, Valario's Rest. Now that we've returned the notes to Clario, the ship is repaired and ready to take to sea. Well, mostly ready. Now we're back to the overworld, but we now have a ship, and we're ready to explore. It's pretty much an open world at this point. There will be indicators when monsters are drastically over-leveling you. It'll be indicated with little skulls above their head. I recommend not picking any fights with monsters that are over-leveled. Just try to find quests that you can solve at your own level, and otherwise just have fun exploring. Oh, by the way, here's a good example. This is a skull by the burial site that indicates that it's an over-leveled area for you. The first place you'll want to go is Port Maje to buy supplies. So the last thing I'll show you is how ship management works. You can click this button here or press the hotkey H. And here is our ship. Here is the crew that we've managed to gather so far. We have 5 if you saved RTwP at the very first fight of the game. Some of you might have chosen a different option, in which case you'll need to hire at least 1 more sailor because you need 5 sailors to crew this ship properly. One of our sailors is injured, Arena. I recommend just putting her into resting for now. And then the only thing you need to know is food. If you sail too long without food and water, your morale, which is up here, will drop to 0 and your crew may mutiny. So to avoid that, make sure you have lots of food and water to feed your crew. If you scroll over the food and water, it'll show you what bonuses or negatives this food has when you feed it to the crew. So for example, if you just feed your crew hardtack, they will be fed, but they won't like it, so their morale will slowly go down each day. The same goes with water. Whereas if you give them lager to drink, their morale will go up by 1. You get the idea. The same food that you use to feed your crew, you can also use to feed yourself when you take a rest, and they will have special rest bonuses as well. So for example, that same lager, which gives the crew morale +1, if you rest with it, you will get +3 might and -1 dexterity. Bear in mind, this is an alcohol, and alcohols will have a hangover effect if you consume them while resting. Because of the background we pick, we also get this special Hylia's Bounty food. This is a very, very powerful prepared meal. For its effects, you get +10 to all defenses, +2 to all skills, and +25 max health. Very strong on a solo run or for your tank. So if I was going to rest right now, I would probably give this to Eder. It's an open world from now on, so have fun. You'll meet many companions. Enjoy reading up on the system and building fun compositions. That's what makes this game great. And yeah, I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. I will catch you next time.